Hello, hello. Welcome back to a Purpose and Pixie Dust podcast. I'm Lindsay Dollinger, and I am so excited for our guest today, Joanne Bolt. Joanne, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and we're going to dive right in.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. And first, before I tell my story about me, let me just say I freaking love the name of your podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
Like if we can all sprinkle the pixie dust into everything we do, the world would be a happier place. So I'm a big Disney fan as well.
Oh, yay. I love that.
Yeah. All right. So guys, my name is Joanne Bolt and I am the host of the B Word podcast. I'm currently located in Atlanta, Georgia, which is actually where I grew up. So I don't know why I say currently, but what I do is I help female entrepreneurs build a business that is based on a podcast and build massive revenue via that podcast.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. So how did you get started doing that? What did your journey look like? I love hearing like how people got to where they're doing.
So this is where everybody laughs. My journey started as a real estate agent. I was an agent for 20 some odd years and I ran a team. And one of my zone of geniuses for making sure our team could do 56 million a year in business was marketing. And so the way that I brought in leads to my team was figure out how do we market a little bit differently than every other real estate agent out there? Because I mean, I laughingly say like you can throw a rock and it will probably hit a realtor in the back and bounce off of them and hit another realtor. Like that's how many there are in the Atlanta area. And so during COVID, when everything sort of shut down and the world changed a little bit, we weren't selling homes quite as easily. I had to figure out new ways to market. And I started a podcast for coaching real estate agents. And then I was like, oh my gosh, my business exploded. Why? Because podcast takes you from a commodity of one to a commodity that everyone needs in their life. And so I started leaning more into the podcasting. And the more and more I did that, the less and less I loved my real estate career. And the more I loved just teaching women, because I have a heart for women entrepreneurs, how to build their business with podcasting is a major vehicle behind it.
I love that. Okay, so let's dive in because I know I have some people listening right now who either are wanting to start their podcast, they already have their podcast, but I feel like the thing that people never really, or the thing that seems the most difficult is, okay, how am I actually going to monetize this podcast? So what are some ways that you tell your clients or other women that they can either start monetizing their podcast or use their podcast to drive more sales into their business?
Well, the very first question I'm always going to ask is, why do we want to monetize the actual podcast? Or would it be better to enhance your current business with the podcast? So can we monetize your business through the podcast? Which one of those makes more sense for your business? Because let's be honest, a podcast in its infancy stages where you're getting 100, maybe 200 listens per episode, you're not at the point where you can monetize your podcast. Right. You would be better served to take that coaching business, that speaking business, that author, whatever it is that your main bread and butter is, and utilizing the podcast to monetize it. And then have an end goal in mind of, if I get to this stage, if I have this size of an email list or this many audience listeners on YouTube or downloads on Apple, then we can start actually monetizing the podcast as a piece of the business. And that's where I start.
Yeah, I love that. One question I was just going to ask with that, and then I just left is there a certain, because you just said when you get to a certain email size or whatnot, is there a certain number of downloads per episode that you're like, okay, you might be ready to go ahead and let's talk actual sponsorships or things like that? Or does it kind of vary podcast to podcast?
It varies podcast to podcast. And I know that that's not the answer that everyone wants, but it's God's honest truth.
Yeah.
There's no one recipe for monetizing your podcast. A lot of it depends on who your audience is. Like who in the heck is listening to your podcast? Because if you have 1 million downloads and it's literally just everyone in the world, it's easy to get a sponsor. Like a lot of companies want to pay you when you have 1 million downloads, but who's the right person that not, to bring in as an ad that won't repel your listeners? Or if you have a smaller podcast and they're super engaged, they download every episode, they open your email list and you've got, 600 on your email list and they are responding back to your emails. They're really, really engaging as a community. Then go pick a sponsor that really fits well with that community. would actually add value into their life, and they'll pay you more for sponsorship because they're not throwing spaghetti at a marketing ad on your podcast. They're throwing ad dollars into a very engaged community that is likely to purchase.
Yeah, that very specific niche I think is very important. And that warmed up audience as well.
Oh, yeah. And so that's why it's not always size that matters. It's the how, what does the audience look like and who are they?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the micro influencer versus like I don't know, just the normal influencer on Instagram. Yeah, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about marketing your podcast then, because that's another thing that I have heard a lot is now I'm just going to make this podcast and everyone's going to come to me and listen. And you and I both know that is not the case.
If you build it, they won't come. I mean,
yeah.
The old movie says they will. That's not true.
Right. Okay. So what is a good way to get started promoting or even strategizing more eyes on your podcast?
I would start obviously with social media. That's where everyone goes first. The big question that you've got to ask yourself is, again, who is your audience? So which platform? If you're doing a podcast that is very corporate minded or very, something where your audience is going to be playing on the LinkedIn platform the most, then you need to be promoting it on LinkedIn, but not necessarily Facebook. If your audience really aren't Facebook users. If you're doing a podcast all about recipes, cooking, wedding photography, starting a podcast, things that people search up a lot, Pinterest is a great platform to be marketing your podcast. So yes, social is where you start to market it, but where most people miss the mark is they go to wherever they like to play. Like I'm on Instagram the most. And so you throw it up on Instagram or Facebook and you're like, oh, they'll just find it. No, if your people aren't on Instagram, they're on TikTok, then you need to be on TikTok, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So do you have a lot of clients or maybe even you yourself? Do you use TikTok a lot? I know I personally don't, and I definitely probably should.
I don't. I probably should. I'm 44 years old. I will openly raise my hand and say there's just only so much I can fit into my social media brain at one time. So currently I play a lot on LinkedIn and I play a lot on Instagram. At some point I'll probably pull in TikTok, but I'm happy where I am in that little pool, building the community there. And so I'm just gonna stay there for a while.
Yeah. What is your take on creating a show that is solo episodes versus having guests on your show in regards to marketing your episodes?
I think it's fantastic. You just pick one and stick to it or do a good combination. I do a combination on the B Word podcast. On Tuesdays, I do solos. On Thursdays, I do interviews. And the reason I selected the mixed combination is I do a lot of training and teaching in my world. So let you see how I'm training and teaching, or let me bring in on Thursdays, women like you that are entrepreneurs that have a podcast where we can talk about how you're building your business through your podcast. So if you can tie the two together where it makes sense, it's not just a random charcuterie board, you can do both. If you want to do one or the other, more than likely, you're probably going to want to get started with interviews because honestly, that's the easiest content. You're not constantly having to come up with ideas and themes and topics to talk about, bring in the interviews. If you are a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're an educator in your industry where really you've got months worth of content you can already talk about, go solo.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually thought finding people to interview for my show is going to be difficult. And it's like, I always have an influx of, sometimes I will get to a point I'm like, oh, I don't have any interviews lined up, for the next couple of weeks or whatever. And all I have to do is go into one of my many either networking groups, coaching groups, and podcast groups on Facebook. And it's like, people are raising their hands. So
I would say the hardest thing about finding people to interview, and you can jump in here and chime in, but I think the hardest part is making sure that who you're interviewing actually fits the audience. So people will raise their hand all day long and they're like, heck yeah, let's be on your podcast. And then you have to sit back because the older your podcast gets, the more well-known it gets, the more you do have to discern a little bit like, girl, I love you. And we vibe and jive great at that networking call, but is your message right for my audience? And that's where you have to start getting to that level. That's when you know you're not a baby podcast anymore, by the way. When you start learning who can be on because you've got so many people that you need to pick from and you want to really serve your audience well, you kind of like, that's your clue. You've stepped into that next level of podcasting.
Agreed. And I started asking a few more questions on my like booking form, not just to get more information, but just to get people's vibe, because I had noticed that a few of the people that were on my show, I would be like, "Oh, great, your episode's aired, blah, blah, blah." And they refused to promote it. They would not share it. And I'm like, okay, that's just not my vibe. Like I share, there's, there's infinite amount of business to go around. So like I always share when I am tagged in something or whatnot. And actually I was shocked at, went through my Google Forms. I do that every my answers every few weeks or whatever. And the number of people that I ask, are you willing to share, our episode out when you get it? And the number of people that said no. And the number of people, and I also asked, I'm trying to remember how I worded it, but something like, have you listened to my podcast or at least looked it up? And someone straight up wrote, no, I have no interest in that. Like on the form. And I'm like, what is happening right now?
Things not to do when you're trying to get yourself on a podcast tour.
Yeah, right? And I'm like, I am so glad I asked that question because the first question.
Thank you for your honesty, but
yeah. I'm like, we do not vibe. And the first questions that they answered were really good. And I was like, oh, this would be really good for my audience. But then I was just like, oh my gosh, no, 0% no.
Like, and I have found, and I don't know about you, but I have found like the people who are the most invested with me in promoting their own episodes, bringing their audience into my world, just like I'm sharing them with my audience. I tend to pull those people back in, for a second interview, or like in August, I'm doing a private retreat for women podcasters. And some of those women are the ones I'm bringing in to speak, to teach, to share.
Yes.
So the opportunities for building their business increases because they were invested in my business and it formed a different relationship.
Yeah, 100%. And you can tell, just like anything in life, but those people that you really vibe with, I've done collaborations on a number of different things from people. Either I've been a guest or they've been a guest on my show. And a lot of times, especially if they're a podcaster, it goes both ways. So I'm like, yes, I am 100% telling everyone about your show and how awesome you are. That reciprocated energy is really huge.
It really is. And it's so fun when you find it behind the mics, especially like before and after you hit record is when a lot of that collaboration really starts to happen. And a lot of the, the riffs that happen and just the fun that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. It is super fun. And I think that's another thing with podcasting that really freaked me out with getting started. I was like, I don't know if I will actually have content. Like, I can't even imagine what I will show up and talk about each week. Like, there's never been a week that's gone by that I've been like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. It's so interesting. So I don't know, maybe that's just our personalities or what it is.
Sort of. I will actually take that one step further and say, when I first started my podcast, I struggled with content, and it's because I was focusing it so much in the real estate world, which is where my passions were dwindling. And so I would say, if you are doing a podcast and you're struggling with content, who you're talking to, your messaging may be off.
Ooh, that's strong.
Maybe it's time to pivot your podcast a little bit and change up the scope of what you're talking about. Because if you don't love it, it's hard to create content. It's hard to find guests on it. The whole thing becomes a chore.
Yeah. Preach, girl. Like, that alignment is huge. This podcast was called something different. I rebranded in June of last year. So it used to be the Social Selling Sisterhood. And I talked just to women who are in network marketing because I got my start in network marketing. And then I was realizing like my heart wasn't in that as much. Like, I still wanted the business side, and so this idea for this name and just like my complete rebrand came on spring break last year. I was like, well, I can on the beach with my sister. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is what I can do.
Yeah. I named my podcast The B Word, because when I first started it, it was about, collaboration, not competition in real estate. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even know if the B Word still makes sense for my podcast. I haven't quite taken the step to rebrand, but I'm super close.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking. And all my podcasts before like, I didn't change the intro. I didn't go back and change the intro. I will probably hire someone someday to do that. But if you listen to like the first 2/3 of my podcast, they are something completely different.
Oh, same girl.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
okay.
But it is. And I think it's really cool for people who have followed us on that journey because we are practicing what we preach by, pivoting. And when you're feeling aligned to do something different, then do it.
Yeah.
And
And you just have to
podcasting,
know that some of your audience will drop off. So
yeah,
your analytics may go down a little bit, but then just keep doing it, keep showing up, and they'll go right back up and probably skyrocket once your new audience finds you.
I actually was going to ask you something around analytics. Which hosting platform do you use and do you prefer?
I like Buzzsprout.
Okay.
And I
Why?
will be honest, it's because it's what I started using and
Okay.
it's easy for me to understand. It's very visual based. I looked into Podbean in Lisbon. I did like a trial with them, and I don't know, for me, Buzzsprout just was easier to navigate.
Made sense.
And so I went back to Buzzsprout, and they keep adding new features in. Like now they've got this AI feature you can pay for that will write your show notes with, AI. Like, so from where Buzzsprout was 2 years ago to where they are now as a company, they've grown. And so I'm like, well, why wouldn't I just stick with them? Because they're obviously investing in their own product to make it better for podcasters. And I already understand it and know it. And it's easy. So I'm a Buzzsprout kid.
That makes sense. I've been contemplating switching to Buzzsprout. I use podcast.co. It's not very well known, but I bought into it when it was very first starting. So I actually don't have a monthly fee. So that is the one thing that I'm like, oh, because it does all the basics, but I'm like, I'm not 100% sure if the analytics are as good as they could be. And it doesn't have, the AI features. Like I pay something separate for that. So I'm like, maybe it'd be worth it to switch over.
Yeah. I mean, Buzzsprout has a free feature. The difference between the paid and the non-paid is that all your old episodes, like they don't keep them forever if you're not paying, but they will if you are paying. And it's only like $18 or so a month.
Right.
For the basic, paid version of Buzzsprout. So for me, again, it's cheap and I like it and it kind of works.
Yeah. Yeah. If it works.
Love its analytics. However, one of the things that I have learned as a podcaster is you can't always trust the analytics. So, Buzzsprout will pull the analytics every time it has to send the episode somewhere. So if Apple requests it through the RSS feed, you get a download, or if you embed it onto your LinkedIn site and it pulls it from Buzzsprout, like you get something. However, if you take that episode and put it on YouTube, like they're streaming that straight from YouTube. YouTube is not pulling the episode from anywhere else. And so you have to be able to combine those analytics in your head and look at the true picture of what your episode downloads look like when you've got it in places that aren't pulling from your RSS feed.
That's smart. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Took me a while to figure that one out. So there you go.
Yeah. Hot tip. Yes. Okay. Besides social media, do you have any other tactics for marketing your podcast to get more new listeners?
Oh, absolutely. I rely a lot on my email list. I'm a big proponent of growing your email list as a podcaster or as a business owner. And when you can marry the two together, holy cow, like so much pixie dust gets sprinkled in and magic happens. So I use my email list a lot. And I utilize my website a lot. I believe social media is the welcome mat into your world, and your social media is like your house on the internet. And so there are places throughout my website that will lead you to an episode from the podcast or give you guidance via a curated list that is only for this specific thing. And so we will guide people to the website a lot with freebies or courses or free networking calls in order to bring you into our world, my world.
Yep.
And then lead you down either the podcast route or, my actual paying business, which is all the coaching and the training and the consulting and everything that goes along with it.
Nice. So do you strategically plan out your podcast episodes around a launch or around certain products that you sell? Or what is how do you bring people from your podcast to actually becoming paid clients of yours?
Oh, that is a great question. I actually follow a method. I developed it myself, so it's not probably, what the big podcasters would use, but it's called the FOR method, FOR. And so my team and I look at everything in 3-month increments. And the 4, the month that we're doing the F, we are doing a freebie. So we are always talking about a freebie. I am teaching something on the podcast that there is a opt-in on our website somewhere that you can access, like a download or a quiz or something like that. Whatever we have that's free in our world, like that's what we're focusing around. And then that funnels into the O, which is the next month, which is something that's revenue-based and ongoing. So if the free month, we really talked about the podcast pitch, which is a free challenge that I do. And it teaches you how to get yourself on podcasts. Then the ongoing would be a way to get you into the Podcast Her membership, because I'm going to be bringing in someone that month is a specialist in podcast pitching or taking a podcast tour. It'll all go together in a way that it flows you naturally. And the R month is the big revenue. So that's the one that we're going to be pushing, that is like the retreats that we do, or the accelerator program, which is for the more advanced podcasters. So we're going to be leading you through a 3-month sequence to get you to the big revenue. And then we start back over. And most people don't even realize that that's my pattern, but that actually is my pattern. And that's how we plan out everything.
I love that. So then your not only your content for your podcast, but then do you also do your own ads in your podcast or not?
I do. I don't believe in doing ads because I'm a big proponent of doing to others as you want them to do to you. And I can't
stand them.
I really can't. I will bounce off your podcast really quickly if you've got too many commercials that I have to, zone through. But what we do is the bumpers at the beginning or the end. I will change my outros based on what we're doing, what part of the 4 we're in. So my outro might be, if we're more in the R month, the revenue building month, my outro is probably more like, hey, go share this episode, or I would appreciate a review, something like that doesn't have anything to do with the revenue, because we're already hitting that revenue piece. If it's a freebie month, then my outro is probably like, hey, I talked about the podcast pitch episode. Don't forget to go here and grab your free workbook or whatever. So we'll change the outros based on what we're doing, but we try not to do too many ads on the podcast.
In between.
Yeah. Nuts. Yeah.
Yep. Is that something that Buzzsprout allows you just to quickly replace so that all your podcasts are like that? Or do you go in and you actually manually edit all your podcasts?
Oh, well, we do, manually edit all of our podcasts, but there's a difference between an evergreen outro and a bumper. So an evergreen outro is the one that you actually record, and in editing, it becomes a part of the episode. It doesn't change. Yeah. Then you can do the bumper or ad if you want. Buzzsprout will allow you to do what's called a dynamic pre-roll, mid-roll, or post-roll. And so that's what I'm talking about. I can go in and say, oh my gosh, don't forget that next month in the Podcast Her, we are having so-and-so come speak. If you want in, register before. That would be that ad that we put on during the O month, the ongoing. And we would make it a dynamic post roll. So you record it, you can keep it loaded up in Buzzsprout forever and just hit the button for, I want this post roll and I want it applied to all episodes, or you can select specific episodes and it'll just keep it on there until you take it off.
Oh, that's nice. That's a good piece of tech. I definitely do not have that. That's why I wonder. So, because I have to go in, and if I want to change, that's why I didn't go in and change my intro for all my stuff, because I would have to go and manually edit everything. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that.
Oh, no. So part of what we do in the accelerator program is we put 6 to 8 podcasters together, and I teach them how to really podcast swap in ways that save you time. And one of those is a referral. I fully believe, because I ran my real estate business this way, and you will get more business by word of mouth.
Yeah.
So we do a referral program. So I might create a pre-roll ad that I can put on Buzzsprout that appears for 6 weeks, when I'm teaching this part of the accelerated program, where I could go in and say, hey guys, if you've been loving my podcast, and I know that you do, you have got to go listen to Lindsay on the Purpose and Pixie podcast. She and I just did an episode together. She's fantastic. You'll love her energy. Go click on it now. I'll give you a second and then come back to me. And that could just be a pre-roll that just goes for 6 weeks. And that's just a referral swap to where people will go then listen to your podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
And that's why I love
Actually,
Buzzsprout. It makes it easy.
yeah, that's super easy. That's what I've been kind of questioning, because one of my coaches recommended that I do that, and I'm like, I don't even know how I would go about doing that, because um it would only be on certain episodes the way I do it now, and it would be, you know what I mean? Like if I do it now and post them, then in 6 months or whatever, people are either going to still find it or not find it at all. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that kind of
I
stinks.
like to bake in the stuff that's always going to be evergreen.
Mhm.
And by baking in, that's when you just make it part of the episode that doesn't get erased, doesn't get replaced. And I like to use the bumpers and the pre-rolls in the stuff that isn't going to be evergreen.
Yeah, yeah, that's so
You know,
smart.
stuff
So
that
smart.
will not be relevant in 6 months, I don't bake it in. If it's still
Yeah.
relevant, I bake it in.
Yeah, because like I've had people reach out to me about programs that I have talked about like a year ago, 2 years ago, and I'm like, "Oh, girlfriend, that doesn't exist anymore." Or, yes, it still exists. Here's where it's moved to. The
Right.
link is
And bake it
different.
in if you think it'll always be a part, but like I've got this upcoming retreat in August. So I don't want to bake that into my episodes, because if someone listens to that episode in September, that retreat has already occurred. So I would make
Yeah.
that a bumper pre-ad or post-ad,
Yep.
because I want to take it off once enrollment is filled
Yep.
or once the event has passed.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes 100% sense. I love that. Okay, this has been super helpful. So I have a couple questions that I always ask my guests at the end.
Ooh, go.
So do you have a morning routine, nightly routine, neither, both? What does that look like for you?
I have a morning routine. I have a nightly routine that has nothing to do with the business, and it involves a glass of wine. Big proponent of that every night. And I don't have a lot of creativity in the afternoon. I find that that's when I do a lot of the catching up on stuff, because my creativity is at its maximum in the morning. And so for me, my morning routine is I get up, I drink a cup of coffee, and then I drink a cup of hot lemon water, and I sit down. I will shoot out 1 to 2 emails. I talk to my operations team at 8:45. Then I go and take a shower. I listen to 1 to 2 podcasts while I shower of other people. And then I come back, and depending on the day of the week, I'm either going to be recording, or I'm going to be working on a piece of content for the Podcast Her portal, or I'm going to be doing networking calls. And I'm pretty done by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Oh, that sounds amazing. What time do you get started in the morning?
I get started in the school year because of when my kids get up and I get them, off to school and stuff. I will get started by 7:15 in the morning. In the summer, I do start closer to that 8:45 meeting I have with my ops team, mainly because y'all are going to laugh, but my son's bedroom is right next to my office, and he likes to sleep in. And so I try not to drive him crazy, me being on my
Oh, that's nice of you.
I'm like, listen, there's another bedroom down the hall. You're welcome to move if I'm driving you nuts. But, but he's like,
no, I like this
please
one.
don't turn the mic on at 7 a.m. Okay.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. It's very
things
sweet.
the moms do, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay. And then best or favorite personal development book that you have read, or one that you recommend to everyone?
Oh, I have so many.
I know it's this question always stumps everyone. They're like, oh.
Ooh, okay. Let me look at my shelf right now. I just finished Chasing the Bright Side with Jess Ekstrom.
I haven't heard that one.
Jess teaches women how to be speakers. Like, she's on a mission to put more women on stages, and her book is she founded something called Headbands of Hope. So it's her journey of like going through all of that. And I think it's really, really cool. And I just purchased, I can see it in my head, Rachel Luna.
Oh, I know her name.
I don't know. It's with Rachel Luna. It's bright pink. I just actually purchased that one, and it's going with me to the beach to read. So
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna have to. I'll make sure to link. I'll look those up, and I'll link both of those in the show notes.
Sorry, I'm having a blonde moment, but I'm like,
no, you're fine. I get the same way. I'm like, I've read so many books, I can't even think of the title of one.
I'm a huge. There are books all over my house. There's one on my nightstand. There's one here, in my office. There's probably one in the bathroom. I mean, like, I read all the time.
Yep. Well, that's good. We're learners. Got to be a learner to be an earner, right?
Yeah. And I listen to podcasts all the time. So I will keep those on repeat and just listen. Like, my favorite podcast right now for self-development is Tracy O'Malley's Lead with the Enneagram. Like that, I'm really digging. And I will dig into a good podcast like I will a good book. So for me, it kind of goes back and forth.
I love that. Someone just pulled in my house, so I'm assuming my dog's gonna go crazy. So I'm like, ah. And then favorite vacation spot or a place that is on your bucket list that you are dying to go to.
Oh, love Puerto Rico. Love,
Ooh.
love Puerto Rico.
Okay.
As a U.S. citizen, it's a territory, so you don't need a passport, which makes
Yeah.
traveling a little bit easier sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a quick flight from Atlanta, so we'll go down on the weekend. We actually just came back from there. We'll spend the week at the St. Regis. We'll go kayaking through the bioluminesce. We'll go play in the rainforest. Like you can do all these rock slides and stuff, or just chill by the pool. I love Puerto Rico.
Nice.
My second, am I allowed to give two? Because I'm a big
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I love traveling.
Obviously, I like the water, you guys. I love to take a catamaran through the British Virgin Islands. It's like island hopping on a boat. So get 2 or 3 couples, rent the catamaran, get a captain, and just float for 5 days. Like, oh my
gosh, that sounds awesome.
You will thank me later.
Yeah. How long is the flight from Atlanta to Puerto Rico?
3.5 hours.
That's not bad.
No,
that's awesome.
It's right at like that time frame for me where I get, antsy on the plane.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, okay, I've watched a movie. I've watched,
it's time to land.
I've done all the crushing. Like, I need off this plane. Like, so it's perfect for me. Anything over that, and I'm kind of like crawling the walls of the plane.
What about the British Virgin Islands? I've never looked into them.
Yeah, that's about the same. You can,
okay.
One of the things, so you can fly into Puerto Rico and actually sail out from there, or you can fly into St. Thomas and sail out from there. And so it's about the same. Flight.
Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so fun. My family was just talking about Puerto Rico yesterday because I was talking to my family and telling them that I was pleasantly surprised with how much I really liked cruising because I never thought I would be a cruise girl. And so my aunt was telling me, you got to fly down to Puerto Rico and do the cruise out of Puerto Rico that does, I'm assuming it's the British Virgin Islands, but it does like this. Yeah, it does like the southern portion of the Caribbean, which you don't normally do if you leave from Florida. And I was like, ooh, that's on my bucket list for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. So my husband, Jeff, and I will, we will always look at each other and we're like, oh, we should go to Hawaii. And then we'll look at the flight times for Hawaii and we just end right back up somewhere in the Virgin Islands or in Puerto Rico. Cause we're like, I get that same feel and that same everything, but without the long flight.
Yes. We did Hawaii. The only time we've ever gone actually in 2021. And I will say it was nice, but I feel like you have to be there. Like we were there 10 days and I felt like that was the minimum I would want to do it for as long as the flight. Cause it was basically like flying to Europe. Like it was, it was an all day.
And that's the other thing. We'll look at Hawaii and and then we'll end up flying to Italy or London. London's also huge for me. I love to go to London, but I'm like, well, hell, if I'm going to do a 7-hour flight, I'll just go to Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. We're on the same wavelength there.
One day I'll own a house in both Puerto Rico and London, and like you'll never see me
in the Atlanta again. No, that's why you said I'm currently in Atlanta.
Yes, because the big goal is okay. How many more years until the kids graduate? And realistically, how soon after they graduate is it not offensive to them that mama sells and goes? We're out of here.
A month. Peace out.
So we laugh at my daughter all the time. I'm like, so a week? Like, is that good? Like, can I drop you off at college and 1 week later be out of here? And she's like, Mom, I don't even think you'll make it through the summer after my senior year. I'm like, I might not.
You're like, that's true. You're like, it's true. So I'm going to go ahead and start looking at the real estate right now. And you've got the one up because you're the real estate agent. So you know how all that stuff works.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got contacts everywhere. So I'll just,
Yeah. I love this, manifesting our dream lives. And podcasting you can do everywhere. So like you can pick up your computer and go.
My husband's in sales, so he just needs access to an airport. And I'm like, this is golden. Like we can do this.
Yeah, you got it made.
I know. I'm like, okay, let me get the dog certified as a service dog so I can put her on the plane. And after that, this will be easy.
Yep. Got to take care of the doggies. All right, Joanne.
So let me leave her.
Oh, I know. It's the hardest part about traveling now. Because I feel like my dog is she's high maintenance would be a good word for her. She's got to take her medicine at certain times and her food at certain times. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, Like it's a good
Oh,
thing you're
mine's
cute.
more likely to try to get herself in the suitcase because she's like, oh, where are we
Oh.
going? You know?
Oh,
Yeah.
it makes me so sad when they do that. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
don't.
90-pound lab, not easy to travel with.
No, a little different. My dog's like 23 pounds, so she's
Yeah, you
a
can
little
like
bit
tote
smaller.
her around.
Mhm.
Mine, not so much.
No, they would notice that on the plane. All right, Joanne. So tell everyone where they can connect with you, how they can work with you, and I will be sure to link all this in the show notes for everyone as
Oh,
well.
fantastic. So my favorite place, the playground I am on the most is Instagram. My handle is @it's Joanne Bolt. Or you can go to joannebolt.com, check the website out, check the programs out. If you are a female podcaster, I would absolutely encourage you to get involved in the membership. That is where I pour the most into people and help them out. Otherwise, just shoot me a DM on Instagram and let's see what you need and how I can help you.
And you are the host of the B Word podcast, and that's
The
available
B Word
everywhere.
Podcast.
Yes.
Every podcast player you can imagine.
And it's a good podcast, guys. I love listening to it. So make sure you check it out for your business tips.
Thank you.
All right, Joanne, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And everyone, if you are listening to this, please screenshot this and tag us both over on Instagram and tell us your biggest takeaway. We would love to chat with you.
Yes.